Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today's video is not really a weekly reading wrap up because I have only finished one book this week, and I still wanted to talk about some of the things that I've been reading, and I'm not really vlogging. I started a vlog, but then I kind of lost interest in continuing to talk about the book I was reading. So I got this idea for like a Friday Reads, that's what she calls them, from, I believe her name is Angela at Literature Science Alliance. I really love her channel. She reads a lot of fantasy, sci-fi, some nonfiction, and she reads pretty broadly, but I just really enjoy those videos of her. It's so fun to hear what she's read that week, and even if she includes books, even if she hasn't finished them. I really like that, so I thought that that's sort of the concept that I would do. So I only have one book that I have finished to review, but I'm going to just talk about, I have a DNF and some other books that I'm like in the middle of, because I've sort of started accepting this fact about myself that I enjoy reading multiple books at once. I know a lot of people don't, and that's fine, but I really like that. I like having the opportunity to switch back and forth between different types of books. It's just fun for me, so... But inevitably, when I get in a phase where I'm reading a bunch of different books, then I don't finish anything right away, and then they'll all like finish up at the same time. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the books that I have. The book that I did read this week is Fireheart by Emma Hamm. So this is a fantasy romance that came out a few years ago. I think it came out maybe 2021. And I have read Emma Hamm before. I really like her. I think that she's a really solid author. I do really love like her tone. I think her ethereal voice in her fantasy books feels very whimsical, a little bit lighthearted, and she really captures that fantastical fairy feeling in a way that really works for me. I think she reminds me a little bit of some YA authors who capture that sort of whimsicalness of the fantasy world in a way that doesn't feel super dark. It almost feels like you could just step into this world. It feels very real, very well developed, very well fleshed out. I really, really vibe with her writing for the most part. So I was excited about this, and then I bought it when it came out, and then I never read it, and so it's been sitting on my Kindle forever. And after I had finished my most recent like Christina C. Jones binge, I was like kind of not quite sure what I wanted to pick up next. So I scrolled way down on my Kindle, I saw this book, and I was like, oh, a dragon fantasy romance, and I wanted to read it. And I of course kind of picked this up because of all the hype surrounding Fourth Wing. I didn't personally enjoy that book, but I know a lot of people did. And I kind of wanted to see what else was out there as far as a dragon fantasy romance. So this is not the same thing as Fourth Wing at all. Like, it is completely different in tone, in vibes, in writing, like in characters, and even in the romance. The romance in Fireheart is very, very, very minimal. So this is the first book in a series, and so that's something that Emma Hamm has done in her past work a lot, where she progresses the relationship over the course of many books, which I think is also something that makes her books feel or remind me of YA fantasy in a little bit, even though I know there are adult romance series that do that too, like particularly some paranormal romance series do that. But I wanted to see what I thought about this, a dragon fantasy romance compared to how I felt about Fourth Wing. And while sadly this was not a 5-star read for me, I gave it 3 stars, I found a lot to enjoy about this, and I found this to be much more to my taste than Fourth Wing was. And I think a lot of that is largely because of the tone of this. It does feel whimsical, it does feel grounded in reality, and the magic makes sense. I think the world building in this is superb, but not in a way that feels very overwhelming. Like, it feels really close to reality, but with just enough difference to make it believable and to make it feel fantastical. So the basic premise of this is our heroine. We open up the book from her point of view. She's currently like dealing and smoking like elf weed type of thing, and it's an illegal substance. But it's in a high fantasy setting, like this isn't urban fantasy. And she is an orphan. Her mother was killed in the rebellion because there's an evil king in this world. And she ends up getting caught, not really caught, she ends up getting pulled into the rebellion's side to try and be the one to go on this mission to kill the king. and she doesn't want to, but they know that she's like dealing this elf weed, and so they're like, hey, we're going to turn you in if you don't go and kill the king. And that's not the only thing that compels her to go on this mission. There are several other things, but she eventually does. She goes on this mission to pose as a potential bride. The king is having a lot of women come in. He wants to choose a bride, and she's just absolutely beautiful. And yeah, so that's her cover. So while she's there, she ends up meeting a man named Abraxas, or Abraxos, I can't remember his name. And he is basically the king's bodyguard, but he is also a dragon. He is the last surviving dragon in the world that is known, but nobody knows that he can shift into human form. So that's a little bit of a secret there between the two of them. So that's the romance, is the dragon shifter, the king's bodyguard, and the half-elf woman who is going to try and go in and kill him. Now, there is another layer to this plot that I thought was really clever, because he is the last surviving dragon. Everybody's wondering, but he's like not on board with the king. A lot of people are wondering, like, why does the king have this dragon? What does he have? What power does he have over him? And it's later on revealed that the king has like 3 dragon eggs. They're the last surviving dragon eggs, the last potential for future dragons. And he's basically like holding them hostage so that the dragon will serve him. And there's another complexity added to that, because the dragon can't just steal the eggs back. The king has them like enchanted, so he's the only one that can touch them. If anybody else touches them, they die. So it's complicated in that way, and I thought that it was really clever, because here we have this half-elf woman. Only thing she wants to do is go and kill the king, and she meets this dragon, falls in love with him, and he doesn't want her to kill the king yet because he needs to secure the safety of those dragon eggs. So I thought the premise of this was really solid. The plot was really pretty good. I liked the way the plot moved forward. I liked our characters. There were a few things specifically regarding our heroine's actions that seemed a little bit too like knee-jerk reaction. I think that in this book, probably for the first time, is when I noticed Emma Hamm do that with her characters. She gave them overreactions a lot. They would overreact to something that happened, they would have this extreme reaction, and then they would like flip back to everything was normal, there were no consequences for that action, and it just felt unbelievable in that way. It didn't feel true to the characters. It felt a little bit like a break in the story, a break in the world that caused me to not be able to suspend my disbelief, in a way that, even though this is a fantastical setting, I'm still sort of like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would she do that? She's this really skilled, talented warrior. Why would she make such a stupid decision? That happened quite a bit, and they all seem to be overreactions. It didn't seem to be like the type of response I would expect from this character, and she did that with a lot of her characters, the dragon too, but it was very noticeable with the heroine. So I gave this 3 stars because I think it had so much potential, and I do like her writing style, but there were certain elements to the story that I felt like were weak. So 3 stars. Okay, so now I have my DNF. So I, again, am trying to pick a book up on my Kindle. I ended up listening to Fireheart on audio, and I really liked the audio. So I'm trying to find a book on my Kindle. I don't have a lot of time to physically read, pretty much ever, but especially right now when I've got a lot of work that I'm trying to get done and get shipped out for my business. So I picked up The Infinity Between Us. This is a contemporary romance. It is touted as like a really summer read. It came out last year. I'd never read this author before. It sounds like it's also a second chance romance, and I'm always a fan of second chance romances. But I DNF'd this book at 22% because I kept reading. I'm going to tell you the premise in just a second. But there finally came a point where I was noticing that when I had time to sit down and read, I was scrolling online, I was scrolling on TikTok. I just didn't have a desire to pick this up anymore. So this basic premise is our hero and heroine, they grew up together, their families were friends, they have this beach house that their family both owned together, and they would spend their summers there like every summer for many years. And then finally, the flashbacks that we get, because this has like dual timelines between the past and the present, and there's like a 5-year time difference between the past and the present. So the past happens when she had just graduated high school. She's 18 years old. Wes, the boy, is a little bit older than her. And that's the last summer they spent together as a family in that beach house. And it's definitely alluded to, although I did not see any content warnings in the few pages before this book started. So I don't know what the content warnings for this book are because I didn't get that far and I didn't see any in the beginning pages of this. But it is implied that something tragic happened that last summer, and I'm suspecting that it had to do with her mom's death, and we're sort of being led to believe that the hero was in some way responsible for what happened there. Because when the book actually opens, it's the heroine coming back after 5 years, still dealing with her grief, still really struggling, and she's going to sell that house. So she ends up at the house, the beach house. She sees there's a light on upstairs, and she kind of starts freaking out. Who's in my house? What's going on? So she goes up to investigate, of course, a single woman in the dark, you know, like why wouldn't you do that? And she sees somebody in the bathroom. She opens the door of the bathroom, and she punches this guy who's in the shower. She like punches him through the shower curtain, okay? Of course it's Wes. She doesn't know that. I mean, it says she doesn't know that. And that's how they like meet up again in the future 5 years later. And then they start having this discussion, and he's like, why are you here? And she's like, I'm here to sell this house. And he's like, you can't sell this house because my family owns 60% of it. You only own 40% of it. So like that whole interaction in the beginning really was sort of bothering me, because first of all, how do you not know? How are you going to sell a house and you don't know if you own it or not? Like that just seems like such a fatal flaw in the plot of this. Like I just could not wrap my mind around the fact that she was on her way to go and sell this house, but she didn't know that she didn't own it fully. Like, I don't know, that was a little sketchy, right? And then the whole thing with her just barging in there, like why would you do that? As a woman in this world, I cannot think of any circumstance where I would barge into an abandoned house and punch somebody in the shower. Like, no, I just don't understand. Like, I don't understand that, you know. But I was like, okay, I'm really curious to see what happened that summer. So I kept reading until I just didn't care, right? And I think partly that is because of my inability to suspend my disbelief from what had happened in the plot in the early stages. But also the heroine was, you know, very much unlikable. And I think this is another thing that didn't work for me in how, because she's dealing with so much grief and very much resentment towards the hero, it makes sense on a surface level that she would be very snarky to him, that she would have a really bad attitude, that she would come across as a pretty spoiled brat. And there's another interaction with a friend who had young children that she like interrupted in the early hours of the morning, and she's like, oh, I need to talk to her about Wes, and hope, you know, she'll forgive me because this is important. That just really made her seem to me a very selfish character, and I struggle with selfish characters a lot, so I wasn't fully on board with the heroine. But because we had this element of mystery of what happened that tore them apart, it makes it hard to feel empathy for her because we don't understand fully her actions. We don't really understand why she's being so hateful, selfish, and like, it's hard to get on board with a character like that when the reason we don't understand that is for plot, mysterious things to happen. So I was kind of disappointed because this has been on my Kindle for a really long time. I don't even know how I heard about this in the first place. I'm not sure if somebody recommended it to me, but maybe it would have turned around. I mean, I did DNF it at 22%, and I would call this like a soft DNF. If I ever feel that spark of curiosity about what actually happened that summer, I might pick this up again, but it just wasn't doing it for me at the moment, and I was like, I'm gonna just put you aside and pick something else up. So, which brings me to, let's talk about the audiobooks that I've been listening to this week. So, this is a reread for me. This is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is an adult fantasy series, which I dearly, dearly love. It has a very diverse cast of characters, a big variety of them. I think they're very interesting, very sympathetic. I love the way this world is set up. It's portal fantasy, and magic is only in some of the worlds that this hero travels to as like an errand boy for the king, basically. And I just love it. I love the characters in here. I love what V.E. Schwab has to say about humans, and it's just fantastic. This series has one of my favorite villains and one of my favorite redemption arcs of all time. I just love it so much. So I've been just slowly listening to this, re-listening to this. I didn't actually, when I read this the first time, I read it physically. So I've been listening to the audio, and I'm only right here, that far in. So I'm enjoying this a lot. I suspect this will be just one that I pick up from time to time when I'm feeling like, I don't know, when I'm feeling like it, I guess. I'm not entirely sure when I would pick it up, but I know that I'm going to continue reading this and finishing it for sure, because I want to be refreshed on this world when the next book comes out, which I think comes out in September, which I'm very, very excited about. So That one's going well. That one is going well. But again, that's probably going to be a book that I just slowly pick up from time to time. I mean, the good news is this is on Kindle Unlimited, actually, so I can read it on my Kindle, I can read the physical book, and I can listen to the audio. I have every access I could hope to have for this book. Okay, now let's talk about the audiobook that has been consuming most of my time, and it is the second book in the last, is it the last hours? The last hours. So this is the last trilogy that Cassandra Clare has completed. The third book just came out this year, and this is, for the first time in many, many years, I have a new Cassandra Clare book to read, and I'm very excited. Every single, I've been reading her since 2008. She is probably my most loved, most often reread, most collected author of all time, honestly. I found her in 2008 and ate her books up and have just been keeping up with her releases every single year until the last few years, you know? So I really want to get back to doing that because I love her writing. I think there's just something really magical about her storytelling. I just really love the way she builds her worlds. And I also will admit that there is a good amount of this book that is just very easily digestible for me. I mean, it is YA fantasy, so it is very easy to consume. The world isn't that complicated, but because I've read so much of her books and I'm so deeply familiar with her world, like her magic systems, and even though this is set in Victorian times, whereas most of her books are in present day, I still feel like I'm so familiar with the families, with the world, with the magic, that it's very easy to just sink into this. I don't have to use very much brain, and that's really what I've been needing this week, is just a pure escape, and that's what this is providing for me. I love it so much. This is basically, so if you have read any Cassandra Clare at all, if you've read The Infernal Devices with Will, Jem, and Tessa, this series features their children, so you get to see those characters in a little way, and I just love that so much because I love those characters, and I love that we get, like, second generation. As far as I'm aware, this is the first series of hers that actually does that, unless I'm forgetting. I could very well be forgetting, but, like, this is the first series that is a direct second generation, and it's just so much fun. I love the characters, I love the children. I do really love how she writes her romance, and I think that this series, Cassandra Clare in general, does what I want to see in fantasy romance, where she creates these situations with the fantasy world that cause her characters to be in forced proximity, to be in situations where they're comforting each other, where they're looking for solace, where they're looking for some type of way to find comfort or whatever through a fantasy traumatic event, you know, usually like a battle or something like that. And that's where you see the romance bloom and develop. And I think that it's done so well by Cassandra Clare. I think she really builds it up well. It never just feels like, oh, well, obviously this is a circumstance so they can take their clothes off, right? It just feels like this happened, and look, now they're going to hold each other and they're gonna have their first kiss, and like, I don't know. It just makes me really, really happy. I love the pining, I love the slow building romance. I just love everything about this, and I'm just having a great time. So I am about this far into the audiobook. And I also will say that, you know, I talked a little bit about, I feel like that is what I need for, like, I don't have a lot of brain space, right? And I think I've noticed when my mental health isn't doing great, like when I'm feeling very anxious, I really struggle focusing on books. So usually what I have found this year to be most helpful for me is to return to something familiar like Cassandra Clare. I did that earlier this year with Daughter of Smoke and Bone and Laini Taylor's books. And also to slow the audiobook way, way down. At least for sometimes. Sometimes I do feel like I need to bump it up to 2. But my sweet spot for audiobooks is usually 1.5 to 1.75. Sometimes 2, depending on the narrator, but anything over 2, and I'm not enjoying myself. I can feel my anxiety building as I'm listening to them talk faster, and I recognize that I am only listening to it that fast so that I can get through it. And I don't want to do that with books, like I want to just enjoy them, you know? So that's another reason why I decided to do this video this week, is because I'm trying to let go of the internal pressure that I feel to read quickly, quicker than I, as a normal person who isn't on BookTube, reads, right? Not always. Before I had kids, I was definitely like a book a day type of girl, you know? But once I had kids and a family, that was no more. That was not happening for me anymore. I mean, that's not entirely true, because when I was nursing my kids, you know, you were sitting down a lot and I would often be reading in those early days. But anyways, my point is, I don't know that I have a point. I just want to be enjoying the books that I'm reading. And right now, this is what is working for me. But I also want to continue to make content for you, even when I'm struggling with a lot of life things and a lot of mental and emotional things, without just like coming on here as a therapy session for y'all. Anyway, which brings me to my last book. So the last book that I am reading is Remember Me by Mary Bellog. So this is the second book. I believe it's the Ravenswood series. I actually don't remember. Let me look it up. Okay, yeah, this is the second book in the Ravenswood series. So this is Mary Bellog's new series. The first one came out last year. It's historical romance. I'm a huge fan of Mary Bellog. I enjoy so much how she tells a story. I love her writing. I love how she puts words together. I love how she takes her time with her books and she really dives deep into the personalities of these characters. And I also really like how she inserts little commentary on the state of humans. You know, like there is, in this book specifically, there's something that our hero and heroine have bad feelings towards one another. Like he said something that was really hurtful, that she was really sensitive about her family situation early on. And that haunted her for years. And at the point where I'm at right now, I'm 65% of the way through. She's starting to try and understand, like, just because somebody says something that is really hurtful and that is truly mean, does that make them a bad person? You know, like, so I think that she puts those very little light, almost surface level type of thoughts in here, but they're very relatable and understandable, because you can see that they're coming from our character's point of view, and she does such a good job of getting you into their thought processes and, you know, their fears and their hopes and their dreams, that it makes sense and it feels very relatable. So I'm really enjoying this one. The basic premise of this is we have our heroine, Pippa, who is the oldest daughter in the Ravenswood trilogy, the family, the Stratton family. She's the oldest daughter, and she is finally having her coming out season. She's 22, and because of the words that were spoken that she overheard before she had her first season by our hero, who he didn't realize she overheard him, she delayed her season because she was so worried about what had happened in her family, the scandal that had happened. She was worried how she would be perceived by the ton. So she's finally ready. Her brother, Devon, from the first book, has finally talked her into it. She's ready to go and have her first season. And that's where she meets the hero, and he realizes that she heard him say that and how much that has affected her. And so he's dealing with a lot of guilt and sorrow, which is side by side his feelings of, well, you know, if she didn't hear me, she probably would have already come out and would be married and I wouldn't have been able to meet her. So it's like deliciously complicated in that way, and I just am really, really loving it. It's a very slow building romance, but I'm absolutely here for it. I love all the side characters. I just love everything about it. It's one of those books that I feel like I want to savor every single page. I don't want to speed through it. I love everything she has to say, and I'm just like having a peak reading experience. So I'm really, really happy with that one. This is an arc that I'm reading. It comes out June 20th, and that's actually why I picked it up after I DNF'd the book I was talking about earlier, is because I was like, Mary's books, physically, they usually take me a while to get through because they're quite long, and they're definitely longer than just like a 300-page Kindle book. So I decided to pick that up next, and I'm so happy that I did because I'm absolutely loving it. And I do also think that, you know, because I was already listening to this Shadowhunters book, which is a Victorian setting, and like the romantic moments in here were just like, they were just like so good, but it wasn't like a full-on adult romance because this is YA, and I love that though still. Like these don't feel like immature characters. These feel like characters just on that cusp of adulthood, and they're just for the first time falling in love. And I just love that so much. But I love just the beauty of a historical romance. I just think there's nothing quite like it. So this put me in the mood for historical, and thus I picked up the Mary Bellog, and now I just want to continue reading more of her books because there's quite a lot of her books that I haven't read yet. I've only read her Bedouin Saga and a few others, and the Ravenswood Saga. So I have a pretty extensive, I have started several of her other series, but I haven't finished them. So this is motivating me to do that. So anyway, all right, those are the books that I have been reading this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about this format. I probably will, depending on how I feel about making content next week. I'm not sure if I'll do another one of these, but let me know if you liked this, and if you did, I'll try and make it an every week, every Friday type of video, because I think that might be fun. All right, thanks for watching, and if you've made it this far, please feel free to leave me a blue heart, and I'll see y'all in my next one.